Welcome, and thank you for joining us today for our Opioids Documents in Action webinar. This is a Q&A discussion with Drs. Maud Bernison and Sergio Sismondo about their research on medical communications and the marketing of opioids. Please note this webinar will be recorded. Links to the recording will be posted on our website and shared to our email list. I'm Adam Kuhn, an assistant professor in the School of Health at Georgetown University, and I will be moderating our conversation today. The Opioids Industry Document Archive, or OIDA, is a groundbreaking digital archive of more than 6 million documents arising from the opioid industry that advances understanding of the root causes of the epidemic and helps address corporate behavior that is harmful to public health. Winner of the Society of American Archivists Archival Innovator Award and co-created by the University of California, San Francisco, and Johns Hopkins University, the archive serves as a living repository of information that can be used to learn from the opioid epidemic so as to improve and safeguard public policy and public health, and to ensure that the opioid-related harms that have taken place never occur again. OIDA was created and funded in part through settlements of public interest lawsuits by states, and we would like to acknowledge the millions of Americans who have personally been impacted by the crisis, as well as to recognize the attorney generals and many of the other parties whose vision and commitment to transparency and accountability has made the archive possible. We strive to ensure that OIDA serves as a trusted source of information to help people understand the U.S. opioid crisis. And we are developing this digital archive and its supporting resources for the benefit of the public, including individuals, communities, researchers, journalists, policymakers, and others affected by the crisis. OIDA and its services are freely available to all. Indeed, there are many stories to tell from the OIDA archive documents. From marketing tactics to abatement strategies to policymaking and much more. We expect the archive to support research looking back at the crisis and helping to formulate systemic change to prevent future harms to public health. To that end, the OIDA team is creating a number of resources to help with further exploration, teaching, and mining the archive. For example, we've recently introduced an opioid crisis timeline, a curriculum library, the OIDA data toolbox, and the OIDA image collection, and a redesigned website. These resources provide archive visitors with footholds and tools for research, data analysis, and other forms of exploration and discovery. We're glad to welcome our speakers today, Maud Bernison and Sergio Sismondo. Dr. Bernison holds a PhD in Media and Communication Studies and specialized in science studies during a postdoctoral fellowship for the European Research Council-funded Nanobubbles project. Her research investigates the lobbying and marketing strategies of international companies with a recent focus on the pharmaceutical industry's influence on the scientific literature. Bernison is affiliated with an international or interdisciplinary research laboratory in Paris. Dr. Sergio Sismondo is a professor of philosophy cross-appointed to sociology at Queen's University in Canada. He's editor of Social Studies of Science, a flagship journal in science and technology studies, and he's the author of an Introduction to Science and Technology Studies and other general and theoretical works in the field. For a number of years, Sismondo's empirical research has been on how the pharmaceutical industry creates and shapes the knowledge landscapes on which it operates. See his Ghost Managed Medicine, Big Pharma's Invisible Hands, and recently has been working on a project on epistemic corruption. Neither I nor our speakers report conflicts of interest related to our research for what we are presenting during this webinar. And so now I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Drs. Bernison and Sismondo so they can share a short presentation about their publications. Over to you.
Let me just get the sharing working here. Sorry. So first of all, thank you very much. We're really pleased to be invited to have been invited to participate in this webinar series, and so thank you to OIDA, which I just learned is pronounced OIDA as opposed to OIDA, which is what I've been calling it, but OIDA, and especially to Adam and to Amanda Norman, who organized this event. So we're going to talk about contracts, and we're going to be talking about contracts specifically with respect to the company Mallinckrodt. Um, so, sorry, here we go. Probably known to many in the room, but Mallinckrodt was not the biggest player in in the early stages of the opioid epidemic, and so therefore is sort of went a little bit under the radar from in the public view. But in the period from, roughly speaking, 2007 to 2014, Mallinckrodt eclipsed the better-known Purdue in terms of the total quantity of prescription opioids sold in the United States. So it actually became the biggest player, even though it was not it was operating a little bit under the radar. We're primarily focused on a couple of different drugs, Exalgo XR and Xartemis XR. These are extended release formulations of hydromorphone and oxycodone and acetaminophen or paracetamol. Um, and so Mallinckrodt, which was known primarily as Covidien in the beginning of this period, but was sort of spun off as a separate company from this Covidien consortium. Anyway, but Mallinckrodt sold a number of other drugs, but it's really well known for these widely diverted, to use the industry euphemism, um, M30 drugs. So the it's oxycodone formulation. And you can see even many years after the sort of widespread sale of M30s, there was a black market version of M30 produced primarily in Mexico and known as the Mexican Blues, that is a copy of the drug. And so Mallinckrodt faced many lawsuits, and the results of some of that legal action is the documents that ended up in OIDA. And just in case, before I go any further, I just want to say OIDA is a tremendous resource, and I think that a lot more people should use it. These documents are invaluable. And in fact, the industry documents archives in general are great resources, and I just want to sort of give a plug for them. They're well organized, they're searchable. These are wonderful things. Anyway, so we're working from these documents, and the immediate problem working from Mallinckrodt documents, even just focusing on this one company, is the number of documents. There are approximately 1.4 million documents in just under Mallinckrodt. So I turn it over to Maud.
Thank you. Yeah, so facing all these documents, we had, of course, to dive into the database, which I joined Sergio. It's a fantastic database. The amount of documents that we found that were so interesting and useful were just too many. And at one point, we had absolutely to find what type of documents we would focus on. So we started looking at this database just the day after the release, and really it was by chance. It was not planned and we came across, as I said, a lot of documents that were very interesting, but the contracts were maybe a little bit more easier to work with because of the type of information they have, of course, because you have the name of the people, of the companies who are contracted by Mallinckrodt, but also the price of the services, the type of services they are providing, and also a detailed description of the services. And thanks to the contract, we could kind of picture the type of structure of organizations that Mallinckrodt was deploying to really try to produce and circulate certain messages through scientific channels. So the type of institutions, organizations, and actors we found are listed here. And I think we can go into the activities now with Sergio.
Sure.
Sorry.
Just before I go on, I think, I should say every time much of the time that Maud uses the word we, she is actually referring to the excellent work done by herself. I came into this project a little later and helped with the cleanup, more than the initial insights and strategies, actually. So, let me tell one story of a contract that I think sort of shows some of the value of looking at contracts, looking at these relationships between Mallinckrodt and then other entities. So in the FDA had what's called a REMS program, basically a risk mitigation strategy program. Well, this is a program that is offloaded onto drug companies. I don't know if Mallinckrodt, originally Covidian, would have been among the first round of companies contacted by the FDA about developing a REMS program, but it was by 2012, Mallinckrodt was certainly on the FDA's radar. And so Mallinckrodt responded by awarding the medical education and communication company Global Education Group a so-called grant to develop and launch this CME program. And so this was sort of in response to the FDA initiative to deal with risk. It started off as a $2.5 million program with 10,000 physicians targeted. It ended up actually much, much larger over the multiple years following, which is a testament, I think, to its success from the point of view of Mallinckrodt. So originally, the documentation around this program sort of included a number of comments about the values that would include these things that we've quoted here: education on higher doses, creating credibility with the FDA, enhancing reputation with key opinion leaders, etc. To a large extent, Mallinckrodt treated this instruction to do a REMS program as a marketing opportunity. This was an opportunity to actually share more information about its products rather than less. And so the CME program was designed, in fact, to increase the sales rather than to what we would normally have thought to reduce the sales given the risks involved. So that's an interesting kind of feature. And it goes along with, I'm just going to mention sort of a nice article also on the Mallinckrodt, also using OIDA's document by Antoine Lentecker and colleagues about data diversion and drug diversion, that these things are linked. So here we've got Mallinckrodt sort of creating a program that might be thought as restricting access, might be thought of as encouraging the restriction of access to the opioids, but is in fact increasing access. We also see a number of ghostwritten articles that come also with contracts. And so here's one. This is one example of a contract with another medical education and communication company, Medlogics. And this is to create a review article on the abuse of opioids. And so the plan was here that the article would focus on the ways in which abuse can be mitigated. And so again, this is in sort of I don't know if this is in response to the FDA's pressure or not, but it's creating the idea that abuse is, in some sense, a diversion problem often, but it's also but it has a number of things, and it emphasizes abuse deterrent formulations, which it's producing. It believes that it's producing by having extended release versions, but then also patient assessment. And this is a particular project of its lead author, who is initially in the contract is a potential lead author for the article. The article, which MedLogic's sort of handled pretty much entirely in-house. And just incidentally, it introduces a neat concept, neat from a marketing point of view, the concept of chronification. And the idea of chronification is that untreated acute pain becomes chronic pain. We've talked with chronic pain experts who claim that there is no such, there's no possible mechanism whereby acute pain could could turn into chronic pain by being untreated. But so that's an interesting little innovation in the article. Mo, please.
Thanks. And so we were saying before that there is a great amount of documents, and everything we found, we couldn't always put them in the articles that we wrote together. But some emails, for example, were very interesting to also have the bigger picture and to really understand how to put everything together. And about the scientific articles, clearly. So, for example, there are publication trackers where you will have some list of all the publications that Mallinckrodt and some MEC are working on. But I really selected this email because I think this is really the approach of the director of scientific communication of Mallinckrodt. And I think it really illustrates what publication planning is for them and what is the purpose of it. So I'll just read a few sentences from this. So he says, our publication plan is designed to make the best of what labeling permits by way of providing peer-reviewed support for marketing claims. While providing scientific support for off-label discussions, our plans are designed to be scientifically solid but intellectually flexible and adaptable to new product developments, as well as our own evolving scientific story. To me, this is the essence of strategic publication planning. It's very different from regulatory medical writing and is also different from academic style medical writing. To blend all these elements with marketing realities and plans is an art, and the value of art, of course, involves a subjective element that is ultimately hard to describe. And here, really, we see that marketing is at the core of their scientific strategy. And if there is also one element that's important is the KOLs. And what we see in another email on this one, and this person we didn't include in the articles either that we were writing about, but what is interesting here as well is that what we saw with other KOLs and with this one is that they wear different hats. So for example, here, this doctor is not only a fantastic prescriber for Mallinckrodt, but he's also a fantastic speaker. So he is clearly an opinion leader who is going to convince his peers, but also who is going to prescribe a lot Exelco. And so these are just two examples of all the documents that we found that we really liked because they were really illustrative of what we wanted to explain about this strategy. And if we take the all overview of the network, so here the contracts are limited because, of course, we didn't have access to all the contracts. But what they really, I think, brought to the story is a kind of a structured way of looking at how Mallinckrodt is subcontracting different types of actors for different types of activities. And it also gives a good idea of how to dig deeper into specific relationship. So maybe you want to add something, Sergio?
No, I mean, I think that says it beautifully. I mean, I think, but I'll just a little bit that that the company Mallinckrodt is outsourcing a huge amount of its efforts, and the contracts, which include memorandums of understanding and all sorts of other things, are cases where typically some payment is going for another agent or agency to perform some kind of service. And so then you can kind of see sort of all of these external relationships in Mallinckrodt. And there are this is a nice complement to some of the studies of the internal activities. Sales activities, for example, are more internal activities. So we see all these external things, and we can follow along past the actual contract then to see what. So then we can do focused searches on the particular people or entities named in these contracts to see some of the things that are going on. And that produces some of the emails, for example, that Maud just read before this slide. And we stop there. Thank you very much again. And I hope everybody will jump into the OIDA database and start looking at amazing things, the amazing things that are there. We also thank various institutions that have supported us along the way.
Great. Well, thank you, Sergio and Maud. While the participants in the webinar are kind of, busy typing away their questions, which we will field, I have a couple, I have questions related to actual methodology and using the archive, but I also have some broader conceptual ones. The first one is, why engage in these contractual relationships? These are well-capitalized firms. Why not just hire all these people? Why not have their own? Why engage with, outside actors like these medical, education and communications firms, for example?
So that in sort of some of my previous work, I've sort of explored this question. I think that while these are well-capitalized companies, they do rely a lot on external expertise, and that they rely, just picking on the medical education and communication companies. Sure. These are companies that have expertise at doing various things, and they have their own sets of connections to others. So if there are actual debates within the companies about which kinds of activities should be kept internal and which could be made extra out of house. Yeah. So and a lot more happens out of house than you might think. This is in part a learning exercise for the companies themselves. Because when they see activities, when they contract for activities, then they can learn how sort of some of the procedures that their subcontractors are engaging in, and perhaps bring some of those in-house. But yeah, generally, even these well-capitalized companies find value in sending work outside and then keeping some inside. Yeah.
Great. Maud, I didn't know if you wanted to add to that, or whether.
I don't think so. I just came across some emails where at one point Mallinckrodt was finding it too expensive to hire MEC, so they started trying to find some freelance people to do that, and they did. But then they also reduced their activities. So, yeah. But that's, yeah.
The one thing that strikes me as somebody who's also done research using the archive and picking through this is how difficult it is kind of disentangling the directionality of the flow. You mentioned these manuscripts that are in preparation. You oftentimes get the source, 40 different entries of the same manuscript, but each line is changed, and you can see the work in progress as the sales team kind of manipulates the narrative of a scientific publication in the same way that, you know, a researcher would write it, but with kind of a sales lens. And one thing that struck me is you can actually find in sales like strategy decks where the publication fits in on the timeline with the release of the drugs and stuff. And I didn't know if when you're you helpfully zeroed in on one kind of contract and depth in the process, but I didn't know if there were others that you wanted to highlight that you didn't have the opportunity to in your slides that really spoke to this, or the difficulty of actually, you know, tracking through the process for us.
Maud, you should talk about your forthcoming piece.
Yeah, right. Okay. So I actually did that for an article with a colleague. So we from the lexicon workshop. So we have the document that is describing what happened during the lexicon workshop. Then there is the advisory board, and then there is the first outline, and then we have more about like 130 documents, if I remember correctly, of drafts, like with comments from KOLs. And then we have, so we could follow everything and see more or less who did what, which correction, what type of corrections on the article. Um, and that was a bit tricky to to find all this for one specific manuscript. But in the end, with emails and drafts and yeah, we managed to have something that I'm pretty sure some documents are missing, but I think we have already something that is pretty structured and that comes from that might actually grasp the whole process.
Yeah, that's cool. Well, we look forward to your article. I hope you're able to share it with this kind of community of practice. Once it's released, I'm sure we'll come across it. There's an interesting question here that's coming in related to the actual methodology of searching through the archive. They were asking, somebody wants to know a little bit more about new or emerging AI applications that would allow you to start your analysis or improve your efficiency or engaging OIDA over time. Or is this something that you wish OIDA would built in internally? Are you able to use it yourself? I mean, millions of documents, right? So it is a challenge.
Yeah.
I don't know if I would trust it because authorization already has to be pretty good, and then you need to have yeah. I think we're not quite there yet, but it's also as you said, like there are so many documents with just one change. And so you need to find really the right documents that you can trust. And I'm not sure how that would work, but I'm not an expert in AI, so
Mm-hmm.
I think it's an interesting proposal. I mean, we never actually considered using any AI. We just used a lot of searches of different kinds and sort of following leads as, you know, after these extensive searches. I think it might depend on what questions you want to ask and answer. Um, we we were, despite the sort of the apparent quantitative approach, we were trying to use that quantitative work to get at some of the texture of what's going on the ground in Mallinckrodt and with these key opinion leaders and the journals. So we I don't think that an AI would be able to flag that sort of aspects of that texture that we might want to see. So, for example, um, there are the publishers, and publishers are doing all sorts of things, and there are contracts with these publishers. Um, and also proposed contracts with publishers, things that don't actually come to fruition. So the journal Postgraduate Medicine, for example, which is an Informa journal, was trying to convince Mallinckrodt to submit articles and purchase reprints, and so it was making a sales job to Mallinckrodt for its activities, and sort of saying, so one of the lines is, I can have 40,000 copies in a couple of weeks, shrink wrapped in whatever increments you choose. And and these are articles. So one thing that jumped out at me when I was looking at this email and was this proposed arrangement is that the subject line of the email thread was Mallinckrodt postgraduate medicine articles, which says to me that to the journal, the company's role in the production of these articles is 100% transparent. Because these are, after all,
Yeah.
articles with authors,
Yeah.
with affiliations all over the place. And yet, what is postgraduate medicine doing? They're writing to some sort of marketer in Mallinckrodt saying, listen, we can get you 40,000 copies of this for such and such a price. And these are, but labeling them your articles. They're right.
Yeah.
They clearly know that these are not independent of the company.
Yeah, and you see that too. These conflicts exist with some of the KOLs are editorial board members of some of these journals as well, right?
Sure.
So the even the boundaries a little blurred. And this is, what I've come to appreciate a little bit more historically in my own research is just how the field of palliative care was advancing pretty rapidly at the end of the 90s with these advanced pharmaceuticals. So there was also a blurring of, providers who are treating these things, who were actually, providing cutting edge knowledge to companies who are developing products and the academic community. And I think it's only as we go into, the peak of the kind of prescription crisis where we start to see the behavior change. And that leads me to this next question, which is there any evidence, this is by David Courtwright, that some of these key opinion leaders or other service providers are becoming more reluctant to engage in marketing as the crisis worsened? So this would be like between 2006 or 12 or something like that. Have you guys come across this at all?
I don't think that I saw any evidence of that. There are worries. I'm not sure that the worries increase in
Mm-hmm.
this. There are worries. I think there's a sense within Mallinckrodt that there are worries that the prescribers have more worries and that they have to convince prescribers that there is less of a problem than they think that there is, right?
Mm-hmm.
That is clearly a task that Mallinckrodt has. Uh, the KOLs, the CME company, these other participants in the activity, the subcontractors, etc. I don't see any change in their attitudes. There might have been in some individual cases. I'm sure there would have been in some individual cases, but across the board, I'm not seeing much. If
Yeah,
I can say, actually, just to add to that, some of these people keep showing up
yeah.
in wearing different hats, as you mentioned, right? So they become sort of the president of the American Pain Society or
Mm-hmm.
something like that, right? And one almost gets a sense that they're too far in at some
Mm-hmm.
point to change their minds. There's a sense.
Yeah.
I can't prove that using the documents, but you sort of see they're still they're still engaging in the same activities. Not 2012, 2017,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
And if you haven't learned your lesson by 2017, you sort of wonder what in the world is going on here.
Yeah, I mean, that also leads me to another question I had, which is, some of these, yeah, at least what's documented, some of these KOLs and individuals have received like upwards of $200,000 annually from some of the opioid manufacturers. At what point does consultation become actual capture? I mean, do you see any evidence in the archives of companies discussing kind of thresholds or what? And that's why I was kind of getting at before of when do you actually cross the line from a KOL becoming, if you're receiving that kind of money, you are borderline employed by the organization. So
Yeah, that's a very good question, I think. But we also saw, I mean, I don't know where to draw the line. Other things there would need to be some guidelines for that, or maybe laws. But in my opinion, there were also some KOLs who started their own CROs. So they would receive the money from the pharma company to the
Mm.
CROs, and they would also work at a university at the same time. And
Mm.
then they would leave the university at one point, but I mean, yeah, it's the financial relationship with the pharmaceutical companies are also very interesting to dig in and maybe to regulate.
Yeah. And I do think there's another wrinkle in this, and while there's still some good questions coming in, and that's that there are medical science liaisons who work in pharmaceutical corporations, and you're some of the only researchers who have actually written about them. And I don't think we know enough about them. It's something we're trying to work on as well. And I didn't know if I know it's not exactly what these papers concern, but maybe you could help us understand a little bit more of the role of these formally employed scientific experts as part of like the advanced sales staff, or actually trying to be some sort of arbiters of information.
So officially, they're arbiters of information. Medical science liaisons, MSLs, are sort of they are the people that prescribers are supposed to call when they want, when they want supposedly unbiased scientific information. But they are also the go-betweens between the companies and the KOLs in a lot of cases. So these are people who can speak more the language of the KOLs. These are often people with PhDs in relevant science. So they are able they're able to engage with key opinion leaders in a way that your average sales marketing person may not be able to, and they can have the sorts of discussions, perhaps discussions that the KOLs find very, very welcome, right? The mechanisms of action, but starting to get into the details. But they're clearly go-betweens. So not related to my Mallinckrodt research and my previous research, I attended workshops for the quote unquote management of key opinion leaders, which is an oxymoron. They can't be both leaders but being
Yeah.
managed, presumably. But anyway, and that includes people who bring key opinion leaders into speakers bureaus and things like that. So a KOL might be contracted to give 20 talks over the course of a year, which is a lot of talks, but 20 talks over the course of a year. And the person who is their contact for that, their contact for the overall activity is going to be an MSL. The contact for individual talks will often be a sales representative on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
So there are distinctions that get made. MSLs officially have no sales targets. So that's the key marker of a difference between an MSL and a sales representative, is that the MSLs don't have these sales targets.
Though they're included in the strategic planning and stuff, to some extent.
Yeah,
Yeah. Well, this is all very helpful, and I want to turn. There's another question here on kind of using the archive, the methodology question, and that's that OIDA has this kind of .new image collection, which I use all the time for teaching. It's great. There's thousands of images arising from the repository itself, and it's been a lot of work to get these all in one kind of location. Have you two thought of any policy questions that you believe might be able to be posed, or a way to kind of utilize these images in a productive way for research as a source of data? Like aesthetically, I use them for slides a lot. I know that I have colleagues that in media studies that do a lot of content analysis. Maybe I need to collaborate more with them for how to analyze these images more systematically, because there's a lot of tacit knowledge that's communicated. I mean, all you have to do is look at the pamphlet for the vital signs and stuff and the scales. But I didn't know if you've thought more about it.
To be
Wish I,
explored.
yeah, I wish I had, but I'm sorry, I can't help you there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So another question with the archive, and one thing that I've struggled with, and the team is real sensitive about in a very productive way. It's one thing that we are constantly thinking as we're digitizing and archiving all these material, and it's supposed to be held in perpetuity, is whose voice is really being represented, because there are a number of different interests that are part of this litigation and that want to see this full transparency and the burden that this enter kind of public discourse. And are there any silences, noticeable missing forms of data, things that you wish that you could locate easier in the archive or that aren't in the archive altogether for various reasons that we should keep our eye out for?
I'm not sure I've come across this problem because there are so many documents that I think it's more
Yeah.
overwhelming than the opposite. Um, Maybe what I found, um, I mean, there are already some buttons with duplicates, but to have like um, the documents are resemble the most to each other, maybe to have them a little bit more sorted. So to have, for example, one bunch of documents that are almost the same, and then they would be part of one group. And so you have less results, but you would then be able to just dig into one specific group to see what type of, but then maybe that would reduce the number of results and make it a little bit more um, understandable. I also found it very useful to have so many documents to read because also it forces you to explore a lot and to see what type of documents you need. But that's my own way of doing it. I don't know, Sergio, do you have
Mm-hmm.
a...
Um, Adam, what kind of underserved publics are you thinking of here?
So I think the voices that are missing for me, oftentimes we don't have enough on the I think the market segmentation, but for particular communities of interest, for example.
Mhm.
I know that a lot of people are concerned about some of the equity dimensions of the marketing and sales tactics. There's some sales visits data, but I don't think anybody's been able to disentangle that. Also, geographic inequities. For me, I teach in an international health department, and the U.S. is part of the globe, and I teach on the U.S. health system. But we know that the same tactics are happening in low and middle income countries, especially emerging markets, and yet that we don't. It's a big black hole, and I suspect that once the Purdue documents are hopefully available and begin making their way to an archive, hopefully the Opioids Industry Document Archive, that we will be able to see what Mundi Pharma and some of the others were doing abroad. But these are some of the things that jump out at me as missing. But I didn't know if you had any other interests that you weren't able to
Right,
really capture.
right. You're absolutely right that the US is well represented and the rest of the world is not. And I don't know if Mundi Pharma has been excluded from a bunch of has it been excluded from the lawsuits for the same
Yeah.
the legal actions for the
Hmm.
same kinds of reasons that the documents aren't there. It's not part of exactly the same company, but that would be really excellent. Um, I think within the United States, geographical regions are not well explored. That might be information that's in the documents, but we need to figure out how to pull it out. There
Hmm.
is so much there. let me just mention some, sort of one example of something where, again, this is really textural and it's very difficult to read and certainly difficult to make strong inferences from. But there are a number of Google alerts that are going to people in Mallinckrodt, and they,
Oh, yeah.
in a sense, they're just like as I'm working through some chain, trying to follow sort of particular actors, then you realize, oh, these people are being copied on Google alerts that are being recirculated, but there's never comments on the Google, or almost never comments
Mm,
on the Google alerts. So you think these are absent. Somebody's getting this alert about drug busts in Georgia or something like that and sharing it with colleagues, but not saying a word about it. And so then you sort of there's uh, a lacune
mhm,
there in a sense. The documents are not showing
mhm,
sort of an important whole, that what is the implicit comment that is being made, or what is the flagged information how are we to read the flagging of this information um, within the company? I don't know. It wasn't the sort of thing we were looking at, but
yeah.
it's just came up.
Yeah, I didn't know. That also brings me to the question. I didn't know if you find some sources of data in the archive more useful than others for your research questions. So whether it's like textbook articles, like proposals, emails, there's so many different kinds of correspondence in there. So
Definitely the proposals and emails. The
yeah.
proposals are great. They're like contracts.
Hmm.
They say, you know, let's do this following thing, and they kind of spell it out. They say these are the kinds of things that we need to do, and then you sort of get to see the activities and often bills, right? Sort of, somebody says this is going to cost $87,000 uh, to produce this CME event, um, right? And so you get to see some of that.
Yeah. There's and throughout all of your work, and in particular this work, I think you've done a really nice job of capturing kind of the epistemic basis of these sales strategies in a way that not a lot of researchers really kind of appreciate. Historians have an appreciation for this, the kind of conceptual evolution. But some of the terms like pseudo addiction, opioidophobia, this chronification, like some of these concepts, do creative teams sit around and strategically come up with them, or is your sense that like somebody uses it in conversation one day and it becomes normalized and gradually it just kind of intuitively makes sense to everyone?
I don't think so. I think some concept came across in the literature just like pseudo addiction, and I think it's Purdue first that used it,
David Haddix, maybe.
and then Malincrot just used it again. And opiophobia, I don't know where this comes from, but I think I'm not sure to which extent they're strategic and inventive or creative, because these tactics are kind of also they were being used by other pharmaceutical companies. Some are also used by tobacco companies, etc.
Mm.
So I think they kind of copy what others do. So I don't know if the concepts also are just made up, or is it just like take them from before, or I don't know what's your
You
sense,
can
Sergio.
Well, you can see the occasional example of something that is generated, and you can see it being generated. So, one thing I remember, and I don't have my notes on this to hand, but there was an advisory board meeting that took place in, I believe, Houston, and so this was they brought the company brought together six or so of their most prized key opinion leaders, like the real inner circles, the people, some of the people who keep showing up in the documents
Hmm.
over and over and
Hmm.
over again. And this was a very productive, clearly a productive workshop, because there are lots of notes about the suggestions made by these people about different articles that might be written and different things. And they end up focusing on one article, which was never written with this title, but the title was "The Time Has Come, Pain as a Disease."
Yeah.
And this is clearly something that is generated in this advisory board meeting by the KOLs, and they want to, they're sort of, yeah, they're pushing this idea. Yeah.
Yeah, that was, by any chance, was that called the Balanced Pain Policy Initiative? What's they called? There was a group that was convened. I don't know if it took hold, but with these kind of key opinion leaders, and they kind of developed a strategic program around this. I mean, I know that, formalizing pain into a condition that's like a disease, that was one of the Joint Commission on Accreditation's controversial moves in coming up with standards for it, because then they'd have to have standards on things like tiredness and like lethargy and like all kinds of things that were symptoms of other things. So it is kind of a conundrum. But I do think that one of the unique opportunities of peeking under the hood, if you will, of these corporations is seeing just how much creative work goes on deliberately and strategically thinking about how to advance from every angle their products and capture market share.
Absolutely. I mean, my hat's off to these marketers who are, doing such amazing jobs for the companies, that you might be really scared about these things, but there's no question that they're doing creative work.
Yeah, yeah, it's true. I do think that there's the damage, though, for the scientific basis and the credibility of the actual research, the empirical research in the lab and practice. And I wanted to hear your reflections a little bit more on, if you zoom out on this work and maybe tie it into a little bit more of your work on epistemic corruptions. Is this a form of like epistemicide, like you would see in I teach in global health, so when we talk about colonizers,
Mhm.
target the scientific basis or the knowledge basis of local communities and stuff. Do we see that kind of a strategic and systematic approach with these sales tactics actually damaging the scientific basis in a long-term way?
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's I so I'm going to be a little bit nuanced here. In
Mm-hmm.
the
Sure.
Mallinckrodt documents, we saw only small versions of that.
Mm.
Mallinckrodt was a huge seller of opioids, but it was not a major scientific player. It was the number of documents being produced, the number of say scientific articles being produced and paid for by Mallinckrodt was relatively small compared with other companies and um, other domains, I think, than opioids too. So especially when you have to break new ground and say, look, this is a target, this receptor is a target for a brand new approach to drugs or something like that. Then you see companies producing 100 articles or something like that over the course of a few years. And that is a sort of an attempt to shape the scientific literature in a certain way. In Mallinckrodt, that in the case of the opioids, and I suspect to some of the other opioid producers too, although won't, I I can't prove that right this second. Anyway, but Mallinckrodt, you see, these articles are in a sense touchstones for the sales reps. So there's a different kind of corruption. It's a corruption, different kind of epistemic corruption, but much more local, dealt with
Mm-hmm.
prescribers, physicians. It's like the you tell the sales rep, if the doctor has such and such worries, then you pull out this article that deals with those worries, which is a different kind of activity than shaping the scientific literature as a whole. It's bringing reassurance mostly to the doctor, or a little bit of subtle choice. Don't prescribe this transdermal fentanyl patch. Prescribe this one instead, or something like that, right? But it's not a global activity.
Yeah, that's helpful, and thank you. We love nuance here. We're friendly to nuance. When you're dealing with 6 million, documents, you got to get into some nuance. So, Maud, I was wondering if you could share. I'm going to turn in a second to some specific questions that in the Q&A that have popped up before we go. But Maud, I didn't know if what surprised you most about when you look closer at these speaker programs. And we've heard a lot about these, but they are kind of funny.
Well, so first of all, I didn't do my PhD on this, so I was shocked by the whole thing. And then when I dig deeper into speaker programs, I find it unbelievable that because as a social scientist, if there is a company that approached me and who gives me slide decks and tell me you're going to be paid to say exactly what's on these desks and just read the notes and just tell your colleagues or some peers to what you have to do. I don't think I would think it's a prank, I think, but when I saw that in the biomedical field, it's pretty common, although it's regulated, but still, I was shocked, clearly. And of course, the amount of these events that were planned were also quite big. So it also means that they were like clearly targeting a lot of people. Yeah.
Yeah, so
I'm
you
not sure
were
that.
surprised also by just how transparent it was and transactional. Yeah.
There was one set of sort of instructions for slide decks, and that at one point it just tells the speaker, read the slide. End of story. It's like as if this, yeah.
We have time for one of these questions. So somebody was asking in the chat whether or not they could get the names of the individual consulting company or the KOLs who started their own consulting companies. So I guess maybe we could type this in. Or if you have them off the top of your head.
Lynn Webster created his own contract research organization to do studies. So I think that's what Maud was talking about.
Yeah.
That a very, very specialized kind of consulting company.
Yeah.
So he was both collecting payments to run studies, and then also speaking on behalf of the drugs, and then writing articles and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of activity. Lynn Webster is, I should say, a very committed opioid proponent, whatever, in whatever capacity. And so there's a lot of money. There's a lot of money moving around, but it is sometimes a little unclear just how much of this is driven by his commitment to opioids as painkillers.
And I see we've gotten a couple questions in the last few minutes, but I'm afraid that we've run out of time to answer them. And thank you very much, Sergio and Maud, for joining us today. I've learned a lot. I'm sure our viewers have. For those of you that are looking for more resources, please go to the Opioid Industry Document Archive. You don't need to pay for anything. It's all free. It's all the same for everyone. You can spend the rest of your life plowing through these documents. It's a gold mine. It's very useful for research. It's very important. And we look forward to the next in these webinars. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.